Welcome back to the Snowpoint Cast. Today we're going to be taking a look at a deck from 2010 called GGAMU. This is actually a Gardevoir variant. This particular list is going to be my buddy Josh Fernando's list. Really solid deck. I think this has potential to be BDIF contender. I think it needs more testing, but I think this is definitely one of the potential best decks in the format. It just has an answer to so many things. Okay, so let's get right into it. Starting off with 4 Ralts. Ralts is going to be your main basic, going into your main attackers. So 60 HP, Psychic type. Future Sight is actually a broken attack. I have literally went from really bad starts to amazing god starts with this attack. So it's for free, which is really nice. Look at the top 5 cards of either player's deck and put them back on top of that player's deck in any order. Almost every single time you're going to be doing this with your deck, just because you want to see the optimal top deck. Especially going first. You know, if you go first, you don't know what you're going to be drawing, and there's a lot of times where I have like a Gardevoir or like a Bebe Search or an out to hit a Gardevoir in my hand, and then I hit like Rare Candy off the Future Sight, and then all of a sudden I'm hitting like turn 2 Gardevoir, and then you're telepassing, and then you're like, it's really dangerous. So Future Sight's actually an amazing attack, and I use it almost every game, especially if you start Ralts. It's just such a good attack, free, really solid. And then Hypnoblast, so for 1 Psychic it does 10. Flip a coin if heads the defending Pokemon is now asleep. So not really useful, mostly going to be Future Sighting. I guess something to keep in mind is if you're going second against an Unown Q, this is a donk attack potentially. If you have an Expert Belt, slap an Expert Belt, do 30, kill a Magikarp or an Unown Q, so that's kind of cute. Okay, so you played 2 Curlia as well. Josh is actually opting to play a different Curlia. It's one that I think it gets a supporter out of your discard, which I think is pretty good, but also Teleportation Burst is really good. You want to keep your energy alive, so I could see a split, but I just like Teleportation Burst because it's just a really good attack. Also, Super Side Bolt is a solid attack too. So this Curlia's got 80 HP, Psychic type. Teleportation Burst for a Psychic and a Colorless does 30, and then you could switch Curlia with one of your bench Pokemon if you'd like to. And then Super Psybolt for Psychic, 2 Colorless does 60. Then the reason that this is really good is because you can one-shot a Gardevoir. If a Gardevoir goes attack you, and you don't have really an out, but you attach to Ralts turn 1 with a Psychic, and you have like a double Colorless energy in hand with an Expert Belt, you can just slap the Expert Belt on, Super Psybolt for 80 plus 30 weakness, and then you kill a Gardevoir. So it's actually really good in the mirror for sure. Speaking of Gardevoir, you're playing 2 of this Gardevoir, which seems kind of low for a Gardevoir deck because Telepass Gardevoir is such a good card. But honestly, you can only play 4 and you play a Lv.X, and you actually play a spicy other Gardevoir as well. So, okay, so 110 HP is pretty solid. A little bit low on the stage 2 side, but that's okay. Psychic type, Telepass is the Poke Power. So once during your turn, you can look at your opponent's discard pile, choose a supporter card you find there, and use that card as the effect of this ability. So amazing ability, probably one of the best abilities Pokemon's ever printed. Just being able to use the supporter cards that your opponent has played is amazing, and you get essentially 2 supporters a turn, which is like so crazy when you're a setup deck like this and you just like your goal is to set up. Having 2 supporters a turn, it's just crazy. Such a good ability. Helps you set up with, you know, basic Pokemon. Also lets you find energy if they have a Roseanne's or like a Cyrus. Just such a versatile ability. Recovery cards too, you can use their recovery cards. Just a great power. And then Psychic Lock is also a great attack, one of the best attacks ever printed as well. So for a Psychic and 2 Colorless energy or double Colorless, you do 60, and then your opponent can't use any Poke Powers during their next turn. So you can lock powers from turn 1 with this deck with Mesprit, which we're going to talk about in just a sec, and then you can continue on to Psychic Lock, and then essentially say to your opponent, that's one of the reasons this deck is one of the best decks in the format, I think. It's because you can Mesprit Psychic Bind turn 1, and then turn 2 Psychic Lock, and then your opponent doesn't get to play powers for the entirety of their game, which is just like some decks auto lose to that. Like if you're playing against like a Jumpluff deck, if you hit them with a turn 1 Psychic Bind and then Psychic Lock, they probably just lose to that. There's a lot of other variants that just lose, but like the ability locking is so good in this deck, especially because you play multiple Pokemon that do it. Okay, so speaking of multiple Pokemon, you're also playing a second Gardevoir. So this Gardevoir is actually broken. It's filthy. So 120 HP, which is a little bit more than the other one. Psychic type. So Psychic Connect is the power. As often as you like during your turn, you may move a Psychic Energy attached to one of your bench Pokemon to your active Pokemon. So this is great because it just helps you move your Psychic Energy around. You can get surprise attackers out of nowhere. You can surprise attack with this Gardevoir, or a Gallade especially is really useful for it. But also, so I'll just note this quickly, but this is kind of like a chump test against your opponent, a chump check, I guess, rather. is because you can use it as much as you want during your turn. Like, if your opponent, let's say your opponent like isn't reading your cards as much as they should, and they don't know this Gardevoir. To be fair, this Gardevoir is kind of niche, and I don't think many would really know it unless they have seen a GGAMU list. You can say, okay, this is kind of a power spray bait, but let's say I have it on my bench, right? And I'm like, I'll attempt to Psychic Connect. And then your opponent goes, he's gonna Psychic Connect. I think I know what that does. It just moves energy. If he's gonna attempt to do it, then probably just means you can do it once a turn. This is kind of assuming your opponent is bad. I mean, worst case scenario, they're good and they read it and then they don't power spray, right? That's the worst case. And then you're back to square one and nothing happens. But best case scenario, you say, I attempt to Psychic Connect. And then your opponent goes, I'm going to outplay this guy. And they go, power spray. And you go, lol, I'm going to attempt to Psychic Connect again. And then they're like, oh, a reading. So, you know, not a frequent thing that's going to happen. And your opponent has to be pretty bad for that to happen. However, kind of a free test. There's no downside to testing that. So something interesting that you can do with Psychic Connect, kind of neat. So Energy Burst, this attack is actually really important against Hippowdon Lv.X. So that's actually a deck that I think is an A tier. I think Hippowdon is actually one of the hidden, really solid decks in 2010. I played against it and lost against it with Dialga, which is like one of my best decks in 2010 and one of the best decks in 2010. It's just such a solid deck. But one of the reasons Energy Burst is so good is because Hippowdon Lv.X, the Hippowdon that you attack with attacks based off the amount of energy attached to it and accelerates energy to it before it attacks. So the reason Energy Burst is so good against that is because Energy Burst says does 20, and then it does 20 plus 10 damage for each energy attached to Gardevoir and the defending Pokemon. So especially if you get into the late game and you've just been Psychic locking, something you can do is switch this Gardevoir active, Psychic Connect, move all the energy, and then just one tap. And it can definitely come out of nowhere, especially if you don't drop this until you're about to use it. Because that's just definitely a solid play, and it keeps your opponent guessing a little bit more. But really solid first attack there against Hippowdon, and then the second attack I've actually used to pretty good effect as well, depending on what the situation is. So Psychic double Colorless does 60, and then Gardevoir has no weakness during your opponent's next turn. So that no weakness, if you are missing an Azelf Lv.X and you're forced to attack against something like Gengar or in the mirror, it can be really, really bad if you don't have that Psychic weakness protection. But with this ability, you know, Azelf Lv.X is usually that out for you, but Psychic protection is another way. You can definitely protect yourself from getting smoked for Psychic weakness. Okay, so we're also playing one Gallade because you can play it with the Ralts, because Gallade also evolves from Ralts and Curlia. So really sick that you can play a split line. So 130 HP, fighting type, also mixes up your typing, which is really important. You can't play Sonic Blade because you don't play fighting energy, but Psychic Cut for a Psychic and double Colorless energy does 60. And then you may choose as many of your face down prize cards as you like and put each of them face up. If you do, this attack does 60 damage plus 20 more damage for each prize card you chose. So this is one of your big swingers. This is really important versus Dialga. Can be important in the mirror too, to one shot get all the energy out of there. Also important versus anything that can kind of just tank, right? It can be important versus Hippowdon, but just having that ability to go, I'm going to flip, 3 prizes and I'll do 120 damage and I'll one-shot your stage 2, or I'll do 4 and then one-shot your stage 2, can present enough swing in a lot of games where you can just say, hey, I'm taking all your energy and your main attacker that you invested resources into last turn, have a response this turn, I'm going to Psychic Cut you again for 2 prizes. And if you can get a Gallade to go up 2 prizes, then it's pretty much doing its job, right? If you can go Psychic Cut, take a prize, Psychic Cut, take another prize, then even if this dies next turn, it doesn't matter because you're trading positively on it. So Psychic Cut, really, really amazing attack, and being able to hit fighting weakness is really clutch in some matchups too. And you're also playing a Gardevoir Lv.X, so Gallade can actually Lv.X into Gardevoir, but the rest of the Gardevoirs can. So being able to put this Lv.X on, you need an additional turn, but the Lv.X is super important. Teleportation is like really key to this deck. So 130 HP, Psychic type, teleportation. Once during your turn before you attack, you may choose one of your active Pokemon or one of your benched Pokemon and switch Gardevoir with that Pokemon. So being able to switch there is really nice. This kind of comes into play once I explain all the Pokemon and stuff. Once we get to the stadium, then I'll kind of explain the sequencing of the deck that teleportation really comes into play in. But for now, we'll just leave it. Teleportation, really solid switching ability to get you back into the active, especially if you have a Gallade in the active, because that's the only thing that lets you switch into a Gallade. And then bring down for 2 Psychic can be really useful. Choose one of your opponent's Pokemon, one Pokemon, yours or your opponent's, with the fewest remaining HP, and that Pokemon is knocked out. So being able to just take out something that has low HP that you've hit earlier, or if your opponent switches to the bench and then hopes that you don't have an answer, it kind of just lets you have a snipe option in Bring Down. You have to break Power Lock unless you have a Mesprit, but there are some situations where Bring Down is really, really powerful for sure. Okay, so getting into the sprite line, we're playing 3 Mesprit. So Mesprit's got 70 HP, single retreat, Psychic Bind is the power, so Psychic Bind is just amazing. When you bench Mesprit, you can use this power. Your opponent can't play any Poke Powers during his or her next turn. So just being able to lock, like I was saying, lock powers on turn 1, and then if you get that attached to a Ralts as well, you can hit a Psychic lock, and then keep locking powers for the whole game, which is just crazy. The synergy between these cards is so good. And then extra sensory is also an attack that you can use because you play psychic, obviously. So it is 20. And then if you have the same number of cards in your hand as your opponent, this attack does 20 plus 50. So this is actually a relatively common attack, especially if you start Mesprit. I mean, depends what you want to do, and it depends if you have a Ralts, right? Obviously, you want to be attaching to a Ralts if you can, but some situations you just have to attach to a Mesprit. And extra sensory, especially with Gardevoir's Telepass, helping you modify your hand a little bit. Let's say your opponent has a hand of like 7, and you have a hand like, let's say, for example, you have Candy Gardevoir in your hand. You had to attach to the Mesprit, and then you top deck the Ralts. Now you can go Ralts, Candy Gardevoir, Telepass, and then if you have like 4 cards in your hand, your opponent has like 7, and they played a collector, you can just collector, search for 3 cards, and then hit them for 70 for 2, which is actually really not bad. And then being able to hit that for some psychic weakness can be okay for sure. Not an attack you're going to be using all the time, but definitely good in situations, especially if you start Mesprit and can't really attach to anything else. Just playing 1 Mesprit Lv.X. Mesprit Lv.X got 90 HP. The first attack is actually a crazy clutch attack. A lot of people would look at this card and say, Healing Look is awful, Supreme Blast, really neat. However, Healing Look has actually single-handedly won me 2 games before. And the reason that is because, okay, I'll explain a little bit. So Healing Look for free, remove 3 damage counters from each of your bench Pokemon. So here's the reason that that's really good. It's because you can attack with a Gardevoir, right? Let's say you take a hit like 70 or something, and then you switch into another Gardevoir, attack with that, take a hit for like 70, 80, whatever, and then switch back to the bench. And then if you, it really depends on what your opponent's board is. But in the board where Healing Look like won me the game, my opponent wasn't able to one-shot after I Healing Look healed the Gardevoir, right? So let's say they did like 60, and then I healed 30, and I go down to 30. Now they have to deal 90, and they just like weren't able to deal that. And because of that, my Gardevoir got a whole extra hit. Both of my Gardevoirs on the bench got an extra hit. Boop. Before they went down. Excuse me. Just being able to heal your bench Pokemon when they've been hit and potentially let them cycle through to get another attack off can be really, really good, and it can be what you need to win you the game sometimes. So Healing Look, good in some situations, keep it in mind. And then Supreme Blast is the real reason that you're playing this guy. So this is your second tank buster attack. So for 2 psychic, it does 200 damage, but if you don't have Uxie Lv.X and Azelf Lv.X in play, this attack does nothing. So you have to have the combo of Mesprit, Uxie, and Azelf on your board already. But if you do, you hit 200, which kills pretty much everything in the format, except for like a Dialga with 4 special, Dialga G Lv.X with 4 special metal energy and an expert belt and a Snow Point Temple. But even then, you can slap on an expert belt if you're not getting deaf and locked, and then you can hit them for 220, and that guaranteed kills literally everything in the format, even a perfectly stacked out Dialga. I guess that might not kill. No, that still kills Torterra Lv.X too. Because Torterra is 180 plus 40, even if they play the Shaman Lv.X. I'm talking about a bunch of cards. It's like crazy situations, but even in those nuts situations, you can one-shot literally anything in the format. So Supreme Blast, great tank buster ability. If your opponent's just saying, hey, I'm putting this big thing in the active and hope you don't knock it out, you can just sometimes say, I'm just going to knock it out because 200 is a lot of damage in this format. Okay, so you're also playing 2 Uxie. So Uxie's got 70 HP, Psychic type. Setup is the power, so really, really good power. When you bench Uxie from your hand, you can draw cards until you have 7 cards in your hand. So if it's the last card in your hand, you just draw 7, which is amazing. And just a little bit of help setting up. Telepass honestly does a lot of the hard work for you in terms of setup, but setup, no pun intended, is also, it really helps you just to draw cards, especially because you play a lot of Pokemon search. So just being able to say, hey, I'm going to use one of my Pokemon search cards to hopefully draw cards to hit an energy or something can be really good for sure. And then Psychic Restore for 1 colorless, it does 20, and then you can put Uxie and all cards attached to the bottom of your deck in any order. This is another potential donk attack. If you have an expert belt, this kills Unown. This automatically kills Unown, but if you have an expert belt, it also kills Magikarp if your opponent just went Magikarp pass. So kind of good to keep in mind there as well. You're also playing 1 Uxie Lv.X. So Uxie X has got 90 HP. Trade-off is the power. So once during your turn for your attack, you may look at the top 2 cards of your deck, choose one of them, put them in your hand, and the other one to the bottom of your deck. So another solid consistency card, just helps you a little bit see your deck a little more. Honestly, Telepass, again, is just way better for that, but having a little bit more consistency is always nice for sure. And then Zenblade is a good attack for sure in some matchups. So for 2 colorless, 60 damage, and then Uxie can't use Zenblade during your next turn. So that 60 is another kind of important. Same with this Curlia 60. So with an extra belt, you do 80, and then plus 30 weakness on a Gardevoir lets you one-shot an opposing Gardevoir if that's something that you feel like you need to do with an Uxie. Okay, and they're also playing one of this Azelf. So this is the Time Walk Azelf. It's got 70 HP, Psychic type, Time Walk. Once during your turn, when you bench Azelf from your hand to your bench, you may look at your face down prize cards. If you do, you may choose a Pokemon you find there, show it to your opponent, put it in your hand, and then choose a card from your hand and put it as one of your face down prize cards. So great for letting you hit prize picks. You do play a lot of one-ofs in this deck. All of your level X's are one-ofs. You play one of this Gardevoir, one of Gallade, and there's just a lot of other particular one-ofs that sometimes it's important to have. Spiritomb's another one of that's pretty important, just to have the ability to access. So it's really important to get that in your prizes. Also important to set up Azelf Lv.X. So you may as well play this guy just to up your consistency a little bit. Then you're also playing one of this Azelf. So as this Azelf's got 60 HP, a little bit less, but this Azelf is insane. One of the best cards in the deck, in my opinion. So downer materials, the Pokebody. If you have Uxie and Mesprit in play, the attack cost of each of your opponent's basic Pokemon is 1 colorless more. So this is really easy to hit. You play a lot of these cards, and they just draw for each other, and you play like Roseanne's, which searches 2 pieces of these. So if you start one, you get the other one automatically, and it just slows your opponent down a little bit. SP especially can just run it, like they can just start hitting you for massive damage on turn 2 if you don't slow them down a little bit. So downer material really helps with that. Downer material also really helps against other decks that are playing Spiritomb. So Spiritomb is a amazing setup Pokemon in any Diamond Pearl format that has Arceus in it. And for free, you got to search your deck. You even play one, which we're going to go over in just a sec. But for free, you just got to search your deck for an evolution Pokemon for one of your bench Pokemon, and then evolve it. So just a great setup Pokemon that a lot of decks play. And this makes that cost an energy, because instead of for free, it's going to cost 1 colorless more. So instead of for free, it's a colorless, which really hurts a lot of decks. Them saying, hey, I want to attach to this benched, whatever, Ghastly, Ralts, whatever I'm setting up. And then all of a sudden having to say, okay, well, now I can't do that, because if I want to start loading my board, if I want to get a Claydol out or whatever, I'm going to have to attach to this Spiritomb. So it slows your opponent down like 1 more turn, which can be really, really big, especially when this deck is such a fast, aggressive deck. They can start swinging for like 80 and locking powers on turn 2. You can swing for like, what's the max on Psychic Cut? 180? You can swing for 200 on turn 2 if you have an extra belt Gallade, which is like kind of insane. But yeah, downer material just kind of slows the game down and lets you set up a little bit more, which is really nice against those Spiritomb and SP decks. And then Bind Pulse is an attack that I've also... So something to note about this deck is almost every single ability and attack is usable, and in certain situations is really, really applicable. Bind Pulse is an example of one of those attacks. So for 1 Psychic, it does 10 damage. During your opponent's next turn, your opponent can attach any special energy cards from his or her hand to any of his or her Pokemon. So I was playing a game against one of my buddies, Noah, a while back. He was playing Dialga, and I was playing this deck. We were just testing the matchup a little bit, and I got to a board state where the only thing that really threatened me was Noah attaching special metals to his Dialga, or Noah attaching a double colorless energy to his Garchomp, so that he could potentially snipe something on my board. Well, I started Azelf. I started this Azelf, and I thought, I could attach to my Ralts again, but I would rather just lock here with the Psychic. Even if I'm not doing much damage, even if I'm only doing 10, I'd rather just do the Bind Pulse and then prevent my opponent from setting up even more, just to give me a little bit more of a chance to set up. So Bind Pulse, another really good power, especially against Dialga. It's kind of a really spicy play there. Only in certain situations, like I started it, so I, obviously I didn't just put it active. But there are some situations where Bind Pulse is really, really useful. And then you also play an Azelf Lv.X. So Azelf X, 90 HP, Psychic type. It's got a Pokebody called Psychic Aura. Each of your Psychic Pokemon has no weakness. So insanely important tech card against... It's not a tech card because you're going to play it anyway, obviously, to hit Supreme Blast. But really important against other Gardevoir decks, and especially important against Gengar. If you don't have this card out, you're just getting hit for way too much weakness. And yeah, being able to protect from weakness is really important. And then Deep Balance is an attack that definitely has some uses as well. So for 1 Psychic... choose one of your opponent's Pokemon, put 1 damage counter on that Pokemon for each energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon. So more of a late game attack, but if your opponent has a couple double colorless energy on the board or something, or let's just say they have like a massive board with a Dialga with like 4 special metal, and they have like 2 double colors on the bench or something on 2 Garchomps. They're just kind of waiting. Something you can do is, because that equals 8, if you have a Psychic and you're 1 prize, you can just snipe a Sprite like an Uxie or something, and then just take the game that way. So kind of an important attack in those situations. Again, like a lot of these attacks are not useful except in certain situations, but in that situation, a deep balance could potentially win you the game. So important to keep in mind there as well. Deep balance, kind of a decent attack. And then you're also playing 1 Spiritomb. So Spiritomb's got 60 HP. It's a dark type, one of the best setup Pokemon in the format. So Keystone Seal, as long as Spiritomb is your active Pokemon, each player can't play any trainer cards from his or her hand. So great, just slow the game right down, put them in the active and say, hey, nobody can play trainers. We're just gonna chill until I can set up my evolutions. And then Darkness Grace, like I was saying, for for free rather. Search your deck for a card that evolves from one of your Pokemon, and then put it onto that Pokemon, and then put a damage counter on Spiritomb. So being able to just search for your Curlias, this is the only play one of for your Curlias, but it just helps you slow the game down. And if you have no other outs, you may as well just search for a Spiritomb, attach, retreat, slow the game down, and then Darkness Grace, and start to set up your board. Because as soon as you hit a Telepass Gardevoir, the game is not really slow anymore. Because it can be, but if your opponent's not playing supporters, then that's fine, because you can still play supporters. And then even if they're not playing supporters, they're bricking. Or if they are, you get the option to use double supporter and potentially beat their pace. Okay. Moving on to some of the trainers, you're gonna be playing 4 Rare Candy. So Rare Candy is just a staple in every Stage 2 deck. Really, really solid. Choose one of your basic Pokemon and play. If you have a Stage 1 or Stage 2 that evolves from that Pokemon in your hand, put that card on the basic Pokemon. So Rare Candy breaks evolution rules, just being able to go Ralts, Rare Candy, Gardevoir on your turn 1. If you're going second, not on the very first turn of the game, because you can't play TSS on that turn. But if you're going second, you can hit a turn 1 Gardevoir, which, if just crazy to be able to hit a Telepass that early. You can't Telepass because your opponent can't play supporters, I guess. But as soon as they do, you're just able to manipulate that. So Rare Candy, really great card for sure. You're just playing 4 Pokemon Communication. This is really important to set up your Pokemon, because in order to use Supreme Blast, you have to have an Uxie X and an Azelf X. And the only thing that searches your level X's are Pokemon Communication, Premier Ball, which we're going to go over in a sec, as well as Bebe Search, which is another supporter that you play. But because you're kind of limited in the things that search for your level X's, you have to play a lot of them. And Pokemon Communication is kind of your out to that. You have like 10 outs for level X's with Communication. So that's kind of a lot. And you play so many Pokemon too that oftentimes you just want to ditch one and then get another one back. Honestly, an amazing card in this list. I wouldn't go any lower than 4 because it's such a good card in this list. Also playing 2 Expert Belt. So this is mostly to just power up your main attackers. If you're Psychic Locking for 80, it does a lot more board effect than Psychic Locking for 60, especially against stuff that's like resistant to Psychic. And also just putting it on a Gallade can be good if you want to go over top, or like I was saying, on an Uxie X, or in some situations a Mesprit. It really kind of depends what your opponent's board is, but most of the time you want to be putting Expert Belt on one of your main attackers just so you can be dishing out some more. You're also playing 2 Premier Ball. So Premier Ball, search your deck or discard for a Pokemon level X, show it to your opponent and put it in your hand. So great for finding your level X's early if you need to find one of your level X's, but also great for recovering if your opponent's playing well and they know what they're doing. Oftentimes they'll try to deny you your Mesprit X setup if they don't want to have to deal with Supreme Blast, like if they're a Dialga or something. So they'll start sniping around you, trying to kill your Uxie or your Azelf or your Mesprit or something. And if they do get that KO, something that you can do is just Premier Ball and then evolve. If you have another Mesprit on that, just evolve back or level X back with the Gardevoir, because we're almost there. We're almost going to the teleportation sequencing, but we're not there just yet. So also playing 1 Luxury Ball. So Luxury Ball, search your deck for a Pokemon, any Pokemon, excluding Pokemon level X. Show it to your opponent and put it in your hand. If you have a Luxury Ball in your discard, you cannot play this card. So that's why you need to play 1. It's only good once, but just gets you any Pokemon but these 4 at some point in the game, which is just really, really good Pokemon search. You're also playing 3 Moonlight Stadium. So Moonlight Stadium, the retreat cost for each of your Psychic and Dark Pokemon, both yours and your opponents, is 0. So just being able to have free retreat on every single Pokemon on the deck except for Gallade is really clutch. And then, okay, so this is the teleportation sequencing that's really important. So let's say you got a Mesprit on your bench, right? Or let's say an Azelf, because that's easier. If you got an Azelf on your bench and you want to get the level X, if you have a Gardevoir level X, something you can do is this. You can go Gardevoir, level X, teleportation, Azelf, Moonlight Stadium, gives you free retreat on your Psychic Pokemon, level X, and then retreat back, right? Or vice versa, where you go Moonlight Stadium, retreat, level X, teleportation back. Doesn't really matter what your sequencing is there, except when you have a special condition on you, because then that shuts off teleportation. But yeah, just being able to get all of your level X's out is really clutch like that, and that's how you're mainly going to be setting up your level X's. You're going to find an early Gardevoir. You want to get this out kind of as soon as you can, just so you can go teleportation, level X with a Moonlight Stadium, retreat, and then you're just going to keep doing the same thing, psychic locking or attacking with Gallade, kind of whatever you're doing, while you're also setting up your board. You know, you're stopping your psychic weakness. These are the two you usually want to set up first, because this one's not really useful until it's the other two are already out. But having no psychic weakness and having the ability to trade off to kind of set up some cards is really, really nice. And Moonlight Stadium kind of just keeps you mobile, especially with teleportation. It helps your setup a lot, because finding the level X's isn't really that hard with Pokemon Communication, Premier Ball, and Bebe Search, especially when you're able to telepass your opponent's supporters. But having that free retreat is so vital, just so you can go, hey, put this up, switch, trade off, do some stuff. Next turn, I'm going to find an Azelf Lv.X, do that. And then the next turn, I'm able to attack with Mesprit. So really, really solid card there. Really super important to the deck. Moonlight Stadium, really, really important. We're also playing 4 Roseannes, getting into the supporters here. Rosettas Research, search your deck for up to 2 in any combination of basic Pokemon, basic energy cards, build them to your opponent and put it in your hand. So just great for setting up, hits your attach and a basic Pokemon turn 1. Most of the time it depends what your hand is, but a lot of the time that's going to be for a Mesprit. You just want to be psychic binding your opponent. If your hand is like, all right, if you have stuff that you can do, locking there is usually better than doing other stuff, especially if you have the opportunity to hit a turn 2 psychic lock. But also can just grab, you know, if you start Azelf and you don't really want to do anything else, so you don't want to potentially risk a Ralts, and you're playing against SP, something you can do is like start Azelf, get a Mesprit and an Uxie, Mesprit psychic bind Uxie, draw some cards, and then hopefully hit and attach that way, but also slow your opponent down. It kind of really just depends on what your opponent's board is, but Rosettas Research just gives you a lot of options in terms of finding basics. Spiritomb is another really solid thing that Roseannes can grab, because you can just attach an energy to the active and then guaranteed lock and Darkness Grace, so really, really solid use for that card as well. We're also playing 4 Bebe Search. So Bebe Search, choose a card from your hand, put it on top of your deck, and then search your deck for a Pokemon, show it to your opponent, and put it in your hand. So really important, again, for finding your level X's. This is one of your only cards that finds your level X's other than Premier and Calm. It is the only card that finds your level X's other than Premier and Calm. So it's a solid supporter just to get your level X's out. Also finds your evolution Pokemon, because Roseannes can't do that. But just being able to find any Pokemon in the deck, depending on what your board is really, really clutch. And then we also play some hand disruption cards. So one of the hand disruption cards we play is Looker's Investigation. So Lookers, look at your opponent's hand, then choose either you or your opponent. That player shuffles their hand to their deck, draws 5 cards. So being able to disrupt your opponent like that after seeing their hand is crazy. And also it's, you know, a draw supporter if you really need it to be that, but mostly it's going to be there for the disruption. And then you're also playing 1 Judge. So Judge is another really solid disruption supporter card. So both players shuffle their hand into their deck and draw 4. Usually you're going to be fine with that because you have a telepass. You just judge and then telepass after for whatever supporter you want to use for turn. So yeah, just great to get your opponent's hand back in the deck. Cyrus Conspiracy is a card that can be really deadly if you let your opponent stack that against this deck. But Judge and Lookers kind of just get them back in the deck. They're also playing 1 Palmer's Contribution. Some people might say that this card might be better as a night maintenance. I don't know if I agree with that because of the amount of like crazy Pokemon that you play. Like for example, if you have a Gardevoir go down early and you want to attack with another Gardevoir, putting a Gardevoir line back is like 1/1/1. So that's 1. And then if you want some energy as well, that's 2 other cards. But you can go like 1/1/1 and then also grab like a basic Pokemon that you need, or, you know, having the option to go a full Gardevoir line and energy can be really important because Supreme Blast discards energy. So you can get it to a point in the game if you need to use Supreme Blast a fair amount that you're kind of running out of energy, and Palmer's Contribution kind of gets that lots of energy back. I guess you could run this as a night maintenance, but almost every time I draw Palmer's, because I don't really care about it early game, but almost every time late game, I would rather it be a Palmer's than a night maintenance because it helps me get that energy back too, which is super important with the card. Okay, so speaking of energy, we're going to be playing 7 Psychic. You know, you could go down to 6 potentially, but it's so important for Supreme Blast, and you really want to get an attachment turn 1 so that you get a turn 2 Psychic lock. So I think 7 is really nice, especially with 4 Roseannes Research. It just kind of keeps your energy consistent for the colored energy that you need to hit. And you're also playing 4 double colorless energy, so DCE. It's worth 2 colorless energy, just great for fulfilling Psychic lock and Psychic protection, I guess. and trade-off. Or no, not trade-off. And Zenblade. So just good to be able to fulfill your attacks there when you need to fulfill some colorless cost, especially there for Gardevoir, though. Just one of the cards that lets you hit a turn 2 Psychic Lock. Really, really powerful in this format. Okay, well, this has been GGAMU from the 2010 format. If you have any questions about the deck, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to get to them. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time.